All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'll call the Shared Services Committee meeting of March the 6th, 2014 to order. These proceedings are being video recorded as well as presented live on KCLV, Cable Channel 2. Customers of cable, CenturyLink may view this program in high definition on Channel 1002. Please note some customers of Cox Communications who do not have a cable box can view this meeting on digital channel 89.5. This meeting, as well as all other KCLV programming, can be viewed on the internet at www.lasvegasnevada.gov. The meeting will be rebroadcast on KCLV Channel 2 and the web on Friday, March 7th at 6 p.m., Saturday, March 8th at 6 a.m., Sunday, March 9th at 9 p.m., and the following Tuesday, March 11 at 2 p.m. If you are parked in the parking garage across the street, you'll need to have your ticket validated. Please see the staff at the entrance to the chambers. All right, getting to our first items then, are we in compliance with the open meeting law? Thank you. We'd like to the City Clerk's office to take the roll, if you would, please.
Okay, Chair Christensen.
Here.
Vice Chair Kristen McMillan.
Here.
Member James Barrett.
Here.
Member Hannah Brown.
Present.
Member Renee Cantu.
Here.
Member David Steinman.
Here.
Member Terry Stimson.
Here.
Member Carol Villardo.
Here.
Member Barry Cornish. I believe we have Colonel Ramsden today. And Member Michael Richards. He must be absent.
Okay, it's my understanding we also have Terry Rubaugh from the Department of Taxation here.
Correct. She's on via conference call.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Our next item is to have opening comments. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to give an update on our hiatus for the last two meetings. We decided in lieu of having our Shared Services Committee meeting is to hold a series of workshops to work through some details between the cities on the area of business license and redevelopment and economic development. Before you today is the result of the feedback we had from the work session on business license, so that'll actually be presented today. Any additional feedback the committee has will be taken by staff, and we'll actually take that back for a full vote at our meeting on March 20th. In addition, the meeting on March 20th will have the shared service arrangement for redevelopment and economic development, and that will be presented on March 20th also. The remaining items to come back before the committee is purchasing, which was the feedback the committee gave on purchasing that will be taken back before the committee. And staff between cities are also working on the area of parks and community services and parking services. So those two will be scheduled at subsequent meetings. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We're on then.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I need to have one other announcement made to the 4 members that are on the phone. When they're not speaking, if they could mute their end, because we get a lot of feedback coming through from 4 open phones, if they wouldn't mind.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you those on the phone for muting your phone. We're on then to agenda item 4. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come to the podium and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Does anyone wish to speak under this item? Seeing none, then we'll move on to agenda item 5. Agenda item 5 relates to approval of the minutes for the Shared Services Committee meetings of, I guess we'll just do January 9th today. Is that correct? And we will review the minutes from January 23rd at our next meeting. So are there any comments regarding the minutes? Then I'd take a motion to approve them.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay. I have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion's carried. On then to Agenda Item 6, a presentation regarding a shared services arrangement in the area of business licensing. And I guess Mr. Blackburn is here today, so thank you, from the City of North Las Vegas.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is Greg Blackburn. I'm the Director of Community Development and Compliance with the City of North Las Vegas. Is there an echo coming through this, or is it just... Okay. It's a pleasure being for you today, and having gone through this exercise with the City of Las Vegas on shared services for business licensing, I want to compliment city management and the division staff. They're excellent. They've bent over backwards with helping us evaluate our processes, evaluate our licenses, identify our revenue, and so they have just, can't say enough good about them. One of the true outcomes of this exercise has been identifying best practices, and that's what the primary of my presentation will be, is best practices, some things we have already implemented to date by observing the City of Las Vegas and doing an internal evaluation of our processes, looking at what can be implemented in the immediate future and the near future. So as we go through these, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate asking them, or we can wait till the presentation's done. It's entirely up to you. The first slide, I wanted to talk about different types of business licenses, so that way we are on the same page when we compare one to another. One revenue type is referenced as gross revenue licenses. This means a business pays a percentage of what they make or claim for license fees. Currently, or historically through the City of North Las Vegas, we have not challenged businesses to verify that their accounting is accurate or that they present any accounting backup at all. It's referred to as performing audits is one way to identify businesses that they claim the accurate. We have businesses that claim multi-million-dollar contracts or even billion-dollar contracts that claim the minimum, that they make $25,000 a year, $25,000 a year, knowing that we don't have an auditing program or a way to challenge it. It's truly like a stated income, as if we were to claim on our taxes how much we make without giving any W-2 forms or anything like that. So it's truly a gap historically where we have not had businesses pay the accurate fees that they should. So the true revenue opportunity there would be performing audits and having businesses pay what they should have been paying. There are some minor fees that we have in gross revenue. And looking at the City of Las Vegas and other entities on, I use an example, mobile car wash, where some entities have them as a flat fee and we have them as a gross revenue. It would make sense to transition some of those low-end licensings over to a flat fee. That way they don't have to provide any accounting. And especially on cash businesses, there's truly no way to do an accurate accounting on those. The other types of license fees we have are flat rate licenses. So there's a certain fee per the type of license in all the various entities. Most of, again, some of ours are in gross revenue versus flat rate, but looking at all our flat rate in comparison to the City of Las Vegas, one of the options we had considered would be the City of Las Vegas code being applied to the current licenses that City of North Las Vegas has, meaning take their fee structure on their existing licenses and comparing it to our fee structure on our current licenses, not what's out there that we're currently aren't licensing, nor looking at the gross revenue options. There's some areas that we could possibly lose approximately $240,000 if we just took their fees and adopted those over into ours. So gaming is one. We have rentals like 3-plex, 4-plex apartment buildings that we require licensing on where they don't, and care facilities where we license. There's several other miscellaneous types that, again, adopting their code entirely and substituting, pulling ours out, we could lose some revenue. Yes, ma'am. Through the chair.
May I ask, would you prefer we use our names when we're testifying again when we speak? Would you prefer that we identify ourselves when we speak? Okay, Carol Velardo. A question I have, as you're reviewing these and where you're looking at potentially using the same type of fee or changing the fee structure, are you also taking a look at the provision in state law that says your fees cannot increase greater than 80% over the prior year? You have a formal practice at which to go. And if you're not, then I suggest at some point when you really figure out what you're doing, that you make sure you're going to be in compliance with that provision. Because depending on what happens, you may have to cycle in over a period of time.
Absolutely. We have already reviewed where we're at so that we're in compliance with the NRS. Apologize for not going through the chair. So that any of our fees that I'm proposing would bring us in line with other Valley entities, and that's one of the other caveats of being able to increase fees as well too. So we'd be in that, and we've also had initial discussions with the Department of Taxation about rules for increasing fees. So thank you very much, and absolutely that's definitely a concern that we make sure we address beforehand. Another option, moving on with fixed fees, would be as if we kept our fees that are higher than the City of Las Vegas's and increase where they are higher. So if we're able to take our existing licenses that we have and increase to their fees that would be higher, we'd be able to have approximately an $87,000 increase with our existing licenses. So again, that doesn't include adding additional licenses for businesses that are operating currently without licenses. Looking at the other Valley entities too, with that same comparison, make sure we're in line with the NRS. Looked at the other Valley entities, and if we were to increase to the highest in the Valley, we could experience approximately $190,000 in revenue, not just restricting it to the City of Las Vegas where their fees are higher. There's other home-based businesses that we're utilizing state information on, and where there's not an actual brick-and-mortar business. So somebody may be operating a corporation out of their home, or something of that magnitude. One way we've been able to, actually our primary field enforcement effort historically has been identifying businesses that have had not reviewed their license payment, and the fees go into, their license goes into expiration status. Our field staff has generated approximately $460,000 over the last year going after businesses that didn't renew their licenses. Looking at City of Las Vegas's practice, there's a huge benefit on how they have it, and we're in the process of making those changes. And what it is where, again, our current code is businesses, they don't renew, they expire. The City of Las Vegas, they don't renew, the money is still owed to the City of Las Vegas as a debt, and they're not out expending the enforcement FTEs to chase the businesses down. If they don't renew, it's turned over to a collection firm, and the collection firm's fees are added to the licensing fees. So it's a very smart business practice. So that's what we're proposing with our code changes, with some of the things that we're applying for right now, is we're changing the expiration of our business licenses to mirror the City of Las Vegas. That way the license remains active, and we don't have to chase the businesses down to have them pay fees. Yes, through the chair.
May I suggest, I don't know what time frame, are you using 30 days or 60 days to see an expired license? But whatever that time frame is, maybe you want to review that, and let's say if it's currently 60 days, at the end of 30 or 45 days, send out a letter first before you put it to collection and have to pay a fee. Many times, especially with a smaller business, they will have just missed. It's unfortunate, but it's a fact on a small business. And so giving them the opportunity to pay with a specific time period might benefit you and save some additional money from those collection fees. It's a suggestion for your consideration.
Absolutely, through the chair. We want to be as business friendly as possible. One of the challenges we've had is where a lot of our license fees are semi-annual, where businesses are used to paying license fees in other entities on an annual basis and also through the state on an annual basis. They're not aware that ours would expire in 6 months as opposed to annual. So we definitely want to put efficiency operations in place and notifications so that they do know that they're due. Absolutely. In doing some of the comparison, our licenses, when we started this process, the first year we had 5,300 licenses in the city of North Las Vegas. Last month, approximately 500 of those licenses had expired, so that number dropped. Since then, our staff has gotten approximately 25% of those licenses renewed, giving them notification, as we just mentioned, to let people know that they've expired. So their staff is diligently on that. Again, that's truly one of the gaps in our current process, our ordinance. That is, there's a draft presented towards City Council to change the expiration. Again, looking at a number of people and some revenues compared to licenses. Of course, the more licenses you get, the lower the revenue is per person. But we just want to do a snapshot on where we're at with the City of North Las Vegas. And again, with our revenues per FTE. Some efficiency enhancements already completed. We've implemented a web-based field compliance software effective last month. So businesses, residents can go online to the city's website and file a complaint on a business. If their activities aren't within the code or they think someone is performing business without a license, they can do that. It's populated automatically for an inspection result and with GIS capabilities, so we can do efficiency and assign geographic areas for enforcement officers to do that compliance. Following the City of Las Vegas, next item, following the City of Las Vegas's lead also, in the past we'd had a building inspector and a fire inspector go out to do the site inspections. We are training the fire inspectors to identify work that had been done without permits, similar as the City of Las Vegas is. So we're cut our work effort down by 50%, having one staff person going out. Some other things that we've stepped up immediately is that construction-related permits. So if somebody buys a building, remodels it, goes through the building department function, planning, zoning, conditions of approval, and then follows through with the business license. What we're doing on the planning and zoning side is automatically signing it off for that review. So there's conditions of approval that council would put on a project. When the construction plans come through, planning and zoning is looking at it, are they building what they told council or the planning commission they would build? If so, it's automatically signed off in the permitting system, so that when it goes to the business license review, there's not an additional step to go back and do the verification. Also with construction activities, if there's a permit related, again, the applicant will typically go through the licensing process while the construction is going on. That way they can open for business the minute they get their certificate of occupancy. We'll be issuing field business licenses when the C of O is signed off in the field. So when the building inspector is on site and signs the certificate of occupancy, the final inspection, they will receive a business license in the field. So they can put the open for business on a Friday afternoon. That's a critical path for businesses to be able to open for business, as opposed to go through the construction process, wait, and then follow through the business licensing. So I think it's a huge step forward for the City of North Las Vegas. Also, if someone's going into an existing building and the building may not have the accurate certificate of occupancy, we'll follow up with code enforcement from the fire inspector's notification. So the fire inspector will go out and do the inspection. If the building doesn't have a current C of O or applicable C of O, then they'll pass it on over to code enforcement to follow up. And our staff will and have been delivering certificate of occupancies in the field. That way it saves the customer a trip from coming down to City Hall. We have enhancements in process. Again, following the best practices, City of Las Vegas is use the same online application they have had in the past, which would be similar with Clark County. That way people will be used to filling out the same type of information, and we wouldn't be asking for something unique that they wouldn't be used to providing elsewhere. A simplified, again, application process follows that. Dropbox. We're working with our utilities department to be able to process electronically scanned barcode bills and also payments. That way it can go right through the scanning device and it'll import it directly into our software program. So it would reduce approximately 1 FTE for the year that's spent on billing and processing those payments. So that'll be huge. The Utilities Department has a firm, and we're able to get that implemented. They'll have just a separate P.O. box, and that'll be the back way to get in for business licensing. Looking at implementing civil fine processes. Currently with the City of North Las Vegas, we just have the only enforcement arm for business licensing would be criminal citations that would have to go in front of a judge in criminal proceedings. The preponderance of evidence to be able to prove the case, and also the labor to prove it, where somebody's operating a business and they just have chosen not to pay a fee. So we're looking at implementing some of the civil fine processes similar as the City of Las Vegas, and we have a draft on that presented ready for City Council. Again, I mentioned the field-issued business license by the fire inspector. I've also mentioned the change from expired license to collections. Another thing we're looking at doing is transitioning from semi-annual licenses to annual licenses. Again, following another best practice of the City of Las Vegas and the other Valley entities, where on the lower end business licenses, I put under $1,000. So if somebody has a $100, $200 semi-annual fee, we'll transition that to an annual licensing fee. A lot of the customer input they had, because our cycles are semi-annual, they're like, can I just pay for an annual? It's just one less paperwork process to be able to do it. So if there's some small end mom and pop type business that's going to be inhibit them business-wise, then we could work around it in the short term. But that's one of the efficiency things. It also reduces 50% of the paperwork for processing the bills. So those two things there will be huge for our efficiency moving forward. Again, the expiration and going to semi-annual licensing. One of the things in our code also that for revenue opportunity is we currently don't require business license for professionals, as do the other Valley entities. So we're working with industry, and we've got a draft proposal for that, being able to move forward for City Council to require licensing. Auditing program. This falls into the gross revenue type businesses to be able to verify that they are paying what they should be paying on their fees. Again, we are in the process of creating a program and can have that up and running in approximately 45 days. Enhancements that we're looking at for approximately 180 days out 6 months is we're going through a detailed license category for our existing businesses. Looking at all our existing types and all of our existing business licenses. We have approximately 5,000, and we've gone through and already had a workshop with staff with field compliance and the license techs and identify areas where businesses should have been licensed in different categories. It's really going through and doing an internal audit process on our own work. Say, was this done properly? Was it an error, or have they changed business practices? So it is also already paying dividends on our efforts. Review square footage. Currently, we have a license fee for square footage of commercial buildings. And somewhat it is a market disadvantage for the City of North Las Vegas, where the other entities are looking at strictly or primarily gross revenue. Gross revenue would be, fees would be applicable to how well a business is doing, how much revenue they generate. A fixed square footage fee, if they happen to lease a larger building, they'll be paying more in fees. So really the intent is to have fees comparable with the type of business they're doing. So it's looking at what our existing fees are in some of those square footage buildings, and then looking at transitioning to a gross revenue model. So we'll be working with economic development because we don't want to hinder any development in the future. Then again, continue to evaluate technology options to enhance efficiency. Revenue opportunities, here's some areas that we've identified. Requiring licenses for banks. We're the only entity in the Valley that has not been requiring licenses on banks because they're regulated by federal government. We have a introduction to City Council on the 19th for this code change proposal, and we've had the business impact statements go out to the banks, increasing it from $500 a year to $1,000 a year, and we haven't received one negative feedback. Actually, the only feedback we got from banks was, you mean we weren't paying our license fees? So they know they have to pay them elsewhere. It wasn't a concern. Again, warehouse storage fees and implement the civil fees. Initiating audits for gross revenue businesses. I put an asterisk here. What I did is looked at the number of licenses, going by which would be 300, and averaging our typical gross revenue is at $1,500 per license. So that way and that's just true average as opposed to the median. So that was how I came up with that estimate. Getting with the state, we know there are approximately 4,000 or 5,000 businesses licensed within North Las Vegas that are currently not paying a license. That's where we're getting some of our data too, on the businesses we know that are there, addressed within North Las Vegas, not to mention the ones that are addressed outside of North Las Vegas, performing businesses in North Las Vegas. So I feel confident that our estimates are on the low end. We've implemented a $100 inspection fee. It's been in our code for decades. We just haven't charged it. Collections, again, those are some of the numbers we came up through. Licensing professionals, assume $100,000 on revenue. Real estate professionals, $40,000. The 3,000 additional licenses, and then the double asterisk there is estimated the 3,000 times the $250, which is our current average for fixed fees. So I took all of the current businesses that we have, interpolated that out to what the average license fee is, not what the average license fee is in the valley, just what our current numbers are. So if we were to implement the fee increase to be similar to the rest of the valley, that number would go up considerably. And then, again, the $190,000 that I mentioned earlier.
Question?
Yes.
Jay Barrett.
Yes.
How did you arrive at the 3,000?
Through the chair, the information from the state, Secretary of State, on the licenses that they show that are addressed within the city of North Las Vegas that don't have current licenses.
So same way you did in the other area?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
David Simon. I'd like to ask a question. I'm very impressed with all of the things you're talking about today, because I see a movement in a much different direction than I saw in our workshop. And but with that, I have to ask the question. Nowhere, maybe I'm getting ahead of you, but nowhere have I heard any discussion about help from Las Vegas and the city of Las Vegas and their staff. How do you do all these things with the, I don't remember, 2 or 4 people you have in this area?
Through the chair, I have some staffing proposals on here that we replace the current vacancy for the business license manager. I'm also proposing that we transition from one business license tech to a field compliance officer to give us more staffing out in the field to find the businesses that are operating without licensing. So that's my proposal. The position is the business license manager is in our current budget, so I did not add that as an additional cost, but it is in our base budget and has been approved.
There's no proposal to use any city of Las Vegas people to assist you in all of these functions that you're going to try to establish?
Currently, that is correct.
I'm not sure I agree with that, and I didn't agree with it before, but I do believe you have come a long way in what you want to do. And for that, I'm very happy. But I think we need to keep moving towards the fact that you need some help to get this done. Thank you for letting me comment.
Oh, thank you. And also through the chair, one more comment on that. We've been utilizing code enforcement staff. Doing business licenses is in their job description. In fact, they were doing it prior to city growth, and they have been out assisting with field compliance, identifying these businesses that are operating without licenses and also operating beyond the scope of their licenses. So we currently have the immediate staff to do it, and what my plan is to city management is to show our track record on our revenue enhancements instead of just speculation of showing what we can improve. So that's the benefit that I have right now with utilizing that staff to perform that work function for field compliance. Yes, ma'am, to the chair.
Well, I must say that you have an opportunity here because you have laid off so many people, and now you're drawing from a few different areas to try to get help, that you have the technical expertise in the city to make sure you get these things done right and on track very quickly. So I'll stop on I think I made my point, but I do believe there's a need there.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, ma'am.
Carol Velardo. This discussion reminded me of one when I was actually in retail business and Clark County wanted to raise their license fees on the gross licenses, and it was about $78, $79. And what some of us in the business community did is we hired, there was Senior Volunteer Program, RSVP.
Yes.
We hired them to literally go through the phone book in the Yellow Pages, and you would not believe what got picked up. So if there's a variation on a theme to that that you can use, it was not expensive, and boy, did it prove beneficial. I'd be stretching a bit, but I want to tell you that what they picked up was over 10,000 business. In fact, I want to say it was closer to 30,000. And a lot of it was professionals
Yes.
that advertised. So it's something I would recommend somewhere in your plan that you would at least explore, because it was an inexpensive way to pick up that revenue.
Absolutely. In fact, with technology, we've taken that currently with our exercise. Google, hit them. You can Google any of these our business types. It will show you their addresses. We can map them, and that is how we've already started identifying the businesses that are out there that are not licensed, that within our current code that should be licensed.
Unfortunately, you can see from the gray hair and the wrinkles, I'm way older than we had technology available.
Oh, you're so kind, thank you. We're also looking at staffing opportunities. The city has a volunteer force that we're looking to see if they could help us as well too. So again, if instead of hiring people directly, if there's any way that we can accomplish the same goal and in a tight time frame, that'll definitely be our efforts. Again, moving forward with recommendations. Again, that we're in the process of filling the business license manager. Truly, business licensing is a very demanding profession, and we would need a manager to continue that effort, to work with regional uniformity, to partner with the other business license entities, also to continue the evaluation of our current fees, our ordinances, and we want to be business friendly, partner with economic development, that as they're out attracting businesses, we're at the same table with them to help promote development in the community. One option we have on performing auditing, we could either go to an outside accounting firm and pay them a commission off the audits they perform, or hire an auditor, which is identified as $104,000. With talking to the other entities, I feel is more appropriate to hire an auditor. There are pros and cons for both avenue, but the benefit of having someone on staff every business day to be able to answer questions when businesses call and ask. The first step on auditing is sending letters out to them. Your business has paid X number over the last years, please prepare your books. First thing they want to do is call up. So again, if there's someone on staff to be able to answer those calls to provide the customer service. Again, I mentioned before reclassifying a licensed specialist to an officer, where we can, because of efficiencies, technologies, changes in the expiration, and the annual license fees, we could be able to free up one licensed specialist now and put them out in the field with that FTE, and the fee increase, or pardon me, the revenue would be the difference in their current job classifications. We have one part-time officer. We could increase that to full-time if it was needed, if we still have a gap at showing the performance on the back end. Some of the benefits of retaining the City of North Las Vegas continue with immediate efficiency and revenue generated opportunities that I've mentioned. The gross revenue, we don't need to change an ordinance. We just need to go out and get it. Continue with customer service enhancements and proposals. Again, as we're going out to the community, we want to make sure that we remain business friendly. Again, hire the above positions for immediate implementation. There's no fiscal risk as far as combined fee ordinance, with us keeping ours the same. And then also on the IT, there are possible IT challenges if we were to use the same system of the City of Las Vegas. Again, I'm not an IT person, but as far as that data being able to communicate with our development-related and accounting-related software programs would be something that would have to take place. But currently, we wouldn't need to do that if we kept it in-house and continuing to operating. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Blackburn, I was very disappointed when we went on our hiatus, but I'm certainly pleased with the progress that you've made.
Well, thank you very much. The Chair, I wish we would have had 6 months to make the progress and show you an outcome at that point, but I'm very pleased with staff, how they've stepped together, and the management allow us direction to go ahead and proceed and enhance these revenues right away.
I've got a couple questions. The $1.7 million in improvement in revenue, what's the base? So what do you expect to increase revenues by going through these processes?
Okay. The base, back to this slide, 1.7 is what you're saying the total?
Yes.
Is we've identified businesses that are currently, we know through the Secretary of State, are operating within our jurisdiction.
No, I'm talking about, you raise a certain amount of business license revenue now, and it's going to go up by 1.7 million.
Yes.
What's the
Oh,
revenue
okay,
up
I'm
now?
sorry, 7.5 million.
Okay, so it's about a little over 20% increase?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. You have, I see you have an auditor. It's a pretty high-powered auditor. I don't know if that 104 includes benefits and so forth,
It would be full laden cost, yes, sir.
which still makes it an $80,000 auditor, which seems like a pretty high number to me, but, you know, I don't necessarily understand the full level of skills that this person would require. My question to you is, if you hired more than one, could you accelerate this process or increase it even more? In other words, we're hiring one. What if we hired two?
The answer to your question, Chair, absolutely it would be.
I'm looking for a return on investment.
Mr. Adair and I have had discussions on this as well, too, and that would be one of the benefits of going to an accounting firm immediately, is that we could start the process and getting the return on investment, actually minimal investment going with an accounting firm, and then for permanent substantial, have it in-house. So we're weighing out the options on that as well.
Mm-hmm. But to Ms. Velardo's comment about how we identify all these different businesses, it seems to me there's almost a business opportunity if the City of Las Vegas, the City of North Las Vegas, and Henderson all hired a group just to go through and Google every single business that we can find and make sure that they're on the tax rolls someplace. I'll bet you could make some money doing that. So it occurs to me as you're talking about, if I heard right, thousands of businesses that have that are behind in their business licenses. You could probably make it pay for itself pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And I also have to, again, continue giving kudos to the City of Las Vegas. They are doing that. They have internet investigators that are doing that work. We have not done it. And I think there's a gap historically. But moving forward, we need to do so. Again, continue with kudos with the City of Las Vegas on their business license operations.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of it in terms of a shared service. But I bet you could find folks that would do it kind of on a commission too. So it maybe wouldn't necessarily even cost you anything.
I know Karen's here. Maybe Karen could come up and talk a little bit about our approach, because I know that our auditors don't just do just those tasks. So we get kind of a multitasking going on with our staff members. But I think your suggestion is an important one for us to at least talk about, to see if there's some partnership using a contractor potentially for the identification. But I'd like to have Karen maybe really quickly talk about what we do now. I know one of the things that Karen and Greg talked about was trying to figure out if there was a way to share our auditor. And we felt like it would diminish our ability to do our own work substantially and get paid back for it, given these numbers. So, but maybe on a larger scale or a smaller scope, there may be a way to have many of us go in together on something along those lines. Henderson County, others maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Karen Duddleston, Business Licensing Manager for the City of Las Vegas. First, I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to work with Greg. We have opened our doors, we've opened our books, we've shared our spreadsheets, we've shared our forms, we've shared our policies and everything. We've spent a great deal of time together and concur with the recommendations of what they're talking about implementing. We've been through it the last several years in really changing how we do business licensing. On the topic of auditors, what we've found historically, we've been looking at our auditing numbers quite detailed. We have 3 auditors. We have over 37,000 business licenses. So to try to get to a point where we are visiting a business on any type of regular basis, it just isn't going to happen with the few auditors that I have. One of my auditors is almost completely dedicated to room tax, which is something that hasn't even been discussed here. We have very different programs. We do a lot of things in the city of Las Vegas that are not assigned to North Las Vegas business licensing. We just do a lot of very different things. So please understand, sometimes we come at this from different views. So I have one person that's doing room tax audits because that's very important to the convention authority. So we do that function, we collect that for them. Our auditors doing gross business license audits, what we find on these folks that are paying $25 is, yes, every now and then there is a diamond in the rough for an auditor. A lot of them are Mary Kay. They are people just out of their business. So what we find when we go after them historically is we're not finding that big money. Our auditors, we've took and look at the last 7 years. And so that gives us some really good times and some really hard times here in this valley. And what we find is that they're very, very consistent. They bring in new revenue about $110,000 a year. So going out, doing their regular audits, we have an audit plan, so we don't target anyone. That's not our job. It's trying to look at a fair audit plan so that we are moving through different industries, different types of businesses, those sorts of things. That $110,000, the value of it, you're paying $104 for an auditor. The value of bringing in that $110 this year is we get it next year and the year after and the year after. So a lot of times these are new businesses that haven't quite figured out how to report to everybody, a state agency, a local agency, how do I get that 0.00068% off of my things? Once we go through that with them, that revenue tends to stay there. So it is the second and third year that you see the benefits of those audits. If I could have more staff, it would be auditors, because we could get to some of those other things, and internet investigators. We took one of our existing code compliance officers out of the field because, let's face it, you can't drive down a street anymore and see all the businesses. They're running them on their phones. They don't even have addresses, some of them, that we can find, but we can find them online. We've got a great partnership going with the state. We're getting spreadsheets from the state and spreadsheets from us and the Department of Taxation for tax IDs. That's where we identified those 3,000 other businesses. We went to state taxation, says, give us every business license that you have tax ID in North Las Vegas, compared it against their licenses. We're doing those sorts of things through the realtors, through everything. But those notifications, how many times you have to notify a business, how many chances you have to give them. For realtors, it was a 16-month process to get all of our realtors. It doesn't come fast. I hope that's answered your question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Eduardo.
This goes back to, and I appreciate that, especially if you're working with North Las Vegas on that internet, or at least getting something that other people, whether they're volunteers or not, can use. But going back to some of your other, it struck me on your building and zoning. When you sign off on a building, have you spoken to the Clark County assessor to make sure that they know that building is there, or the modifications? And the reason I say that is because if there's usually a personal property liability with most of those buildings. And I know that because I rented in a building that somehow escaped. And about, I guess, 4 or 5 years after we were in the building, and we had a license from City of Las Vegas, I got a phone call from the assessor's office and it was, do you know if the personal property declarations have been filed? Well, we filed ours, but there was no record of the building and the other tenants in the building. So somehow you might want to talk to the assessor's office and see, because I do know we have had cases where entities, because they've been so slow in reporting what is being done on building or on zoning, and the permits that actually have been approved and when they've been signed off on, that you're missing a revenue opportunity. So that's one I would check. The other thing, your plan submission, when you were talking about the web and what you're doing on the web, is your plans submission for construction available on the web also, so that that helps expedite?
If there's, Madam, through the chair, we are looking that way in technology to be able to submit plans electronically. We are
Yeah.
able to do it where there's no commercial or construction-related work taking place. So we can do the application online. If someone's submitting a roll of plans today, we don't have the ability to do that. We are in the process of getting in that direction. And also with the county assessors, all the building safety functions throughout the valley are tied in with the county assessor's records. So that's one of the steps in the process that we're tying it through. So the business license function is tied into the same software program as the building safety function. So it's validating the parcel numbers, the building, the occupancy classification of the building, meaning they can operate that business safely inside that building. So that's one of the things we're doing. Currently, an extremely large facility had gone through a construction permits, a 2 or 3 year project. They didn't get a business license. They'd been in operation over a year. One of the things we're doing internal auditing, so that if a large or any project goes through the construction process, that information is also translated over to business licensing staff. So if they haven't already applied for a business license, we will let them know that customer friendly, here's an application, here's a link to go and fill out a license. So it's bringing in all the tools the city has for development. And that was the linkage with development.
And one suggestion that I would make for your consideration, I think when you go to the civil fines, that's a no-brainer. But all of a sudden, not only are your businesses going to be hit with a number of changes, and they find out they're being fined because instead of having that license that goes away, it's now you're out for collection. May I suggest that you somehow do a grace period, maybe a 60-day grace period with some notification, either through the newspapers, on the city's website, to advise your businesses that there has been a change, that you will be going forward, and there will be civil penalties assessed, almost like, you're giving them this grace period of this, what do we wind up calling it in tax? When, an amnesty, get your money in, pay your taxes, no penalty. But if you miss this deadline date, then get ready, because we now have the ability for civil fines. And I think that would be business friendly.
Absolutely. Through the chair, when we bring these proposals, they will all have to go in front of City Council. And those are the things that City Council will want us to be able to show is how are we doing to communicate to the businesses? How are we being business friendly to promote more businesses? So those definitely will be included in our processes. Thank you.
And thank you. I wish you very well. I think you've made some good inroads so far, so it's a real positive presentation in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you for your
Any other
effort.
comments? I had one last comment. I hope, Mr. Adair, that you're tracking these amounts so that the accountability, which I assume to achieve these results is in Mr. Blackburn. I think that's going to be very important for this to have this effort to have the credibility that it really needs.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's our objective.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, Mr. Chair, at the next meeting, we would bring back the final recommendation with the 2 considerations, the business-friendly and amnesty, as well as the idea about the shared partnership with the other municipalities around identifying businesses. Probably not having a discussion item unless the committee wants it, but it would be for a voting item.
Okay, very good. All right. The next item on the agenda there is item 7, presentation regarding North Las Vegas's projected deficit for fiscal year 2014-15 and the timeline to submit a balanced budget to the state of Nevada.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. For the record, my name is Jeff Buchanan, interim city manager for the City of North Las Vegas. If you'll allow me to do so, we will replay our presentation from the special city council meeting, which occurred on February 25th, which will encompass those questions in regards to our financial situation. If you move to the first slide, we have two distinct fiscal issues. We need to settle with our unions, and there's a potential exposure there of upwards of $25 million. And we also have a forward deficit of $18 million in the next fiscal year. So we have two distinct and different financial issues. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit of explanation about more cops, and this will come into play at the end of the presentation. But AB 418 had provided an increase in sales and use tax to employ and equip additional police officers. As we go through this presentation, you'll see that staff from the City of North Las Vegas identified certain funds where we believed we could use for the settlement purposes with our collective bargaining groups. More Cops was one of these funds, but in order to use any revenues inside of this particular fund, they would have to meet certain concessions. And really what that boils down to is no staff member, the police chief, mayor and council, myself, anybody was willing to make any attempt to take any money from More Cops or use money from More Cops if that budget would not remain in balance. The next aspect that we identified was the general fund. We believe that I should better say that Darren and his team identified that if we lowered the ending fund balance from 8% to 6%, there would be an allocation of $2.2 million, which again you'll find later on in this presentation. It's a little bit more neat and summary at the end. But he identified that moving from 8 to 6% would allow for $2.2 million. The condition on this particular aspect of the settlement would mean that mayor and council would have to, by ordinance or resolution, lower from 8% to 6%. Attrition savings, any organization has a certain amount of people that leave for whatever the reason is, retirement, there are terminations, they go for greener pastures, or they just leave the organization for whatever those reasons are. So that does contribute to the ending fund balance, some attrition savings. I can tell you that coming into this fiscal year, not to belabor this issue, but there were some issues financially, and attrition savings is something that we were able to use to shore up certain aspects of our budget. Through the rest of the year, we believed $900,000 would be available to add to potential settlement. The timeline for the fiscal year 2015 budget, April 15 tentative budget has to be in place, but ongoing right now, what we have and have been going through over the course of the last week or 2 weeks, Darren and his staff have been working arduously to put together the budget for the upcoming year with the respective directors. We are now meeting on an individual basis and continuing to give scrutiny to every department to see if there are areas where we can tighten up. March 25th, the final abated revenue projections for property taxes goes into play. Again, April 1st through 10th. That will set up the April 15th tentative budget submission, and that will be city council workshops April 1st through 10th. May 20th, there's a public hearing held on the tentative budget and proposed adoption of the fiscal year 2015 budget. June 2nd is the final fiscal year 2015 budget adoption, and it's to be filed with the county clerk in the state. June 18th is notice of public hearing to augment the fiscal year 2014 budget and submit. I'm going to, I'll just keep going, Darren. What you're going to see in this next slide, in this Venn diagram, is you'll see, and Darren will probably assist me through the rest of this presentation, is you'll see how we came up with the exposure to the bargaining groups. You'll see $10 million in 2013 and $11,700 in 2014, and Darren can speak to this in much more detail. And what you see in the middle there, in the union, if you will, of the two circles, is the holiday payouts, which again is an exposure to the city, but when it's frozen, it's not to be counted again. It's a one-time pay. So that's why you'll see it joined by the two in the union of those two circles. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. Darren, can you help me with my explanation?
Sure.
What happens to the other, each year has their own holiday pay, don't they? Am I missing something there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but because the amounts either are frozen from the previous year or roll over, they're banked, that liability, if not cashed out, continues to grow. And when they look at the balance in the budget in each particular year, they look at the potential under a 100% payout scenario that could be a cash outflow to the city and need to be contemplated in the budget. So in the resolution for 2013, when the number that was reported was $10 million that was saved by that resolution, it included something in the neighborhood of $6 million. In 2014, again, when that resolution was presented, the freezing of that holiday bank payout, the ability for them to come in to get it, again, counted that $6 million, which had not been paid out previously, but could again be a cash draw or drain for the city. We previously reported that the potential exposure was somewhere calculated as the sum of these two, $23 million plus possibly other costs. What was not fully understood at the time was that those two holiday banks were actually the same holiday bank, and that's why the illustration at the very bottom of the page, the $10 million saved from the first resolution plus the $11.7 from the second resolution actually doesn't result in a total liability of 23. It results in something less than that. However, we did go on, as we mentioned in the last meeting, and do a calculation of what that really was based upon a line by employee, and then trued up and calculated what the current holiday bank would be as of the end of this year.
So the holiday payout number is a -1.
Actually, the holiday pay in the second period, because it goes up to 7, it actually grew from roughly 6 to 7 because they weren't able to sell it back, cash it out, or as much of it.
Mr. Chair, if I could share your struggling. Yeah. It helps me if I look at the next page where you've got the numbers broken down. I still don't understand it completely. What I observe is that it is a substantial amount of money for a 2013 holiday bank of $6 million. Maybe this will help understand what you all are referring to. In any event, you come to 23.2 million is your estimate of what the total amount is called for to, if you were to settle in full?
No, no, Mr. Barrett. This slide just reflects the actual amounts that were calculated by the City Finance Department for back pay and the holiday banks. Our attorneys for not only the city, but for all of the other bargaining units that are members of that litigation or parties to that litigation are currently looking to come to a stipulated judgment. But those issues would include interest and other things like that. These are the city's numbers. Right now they're in the hands of the attorneys representing all of the bargaining units. They're parties to that litigation. And so they would have an opportunity to review it as well. But this is solely back pay and the holiday banks that were part of the resolution, which froze the ability for the members of those bargaining units to be able to cash out their holiday bank accrual. I know it's probably something that most of you aren't aware of, but for the fiscal year 2013, you can accrue holidays and keep them in a bank. On all of the bargaining units that are parties to litigation had an option in their contract to actually cash out the payment instead of continuing to accrue those holidays. So in fiscal year 2014, and you only see $1.1 million, and that's where the city manager was talking about those two kind of circles overlapping, it's because they weren't able to cash it out in 2013. That's why it only grew 1.1 million. So the total Holiday Bank exposure that they would be able to cash out right now, or at least at the time of that Darren prepared the numbers, would have been 7.1 million. Does that make a little more sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this the amount that the city deemed it saved? The 23.2 million?
Yes. Yes.
Under the resolutions?
Yes.
Okay. No interest. That's just the money that did not
They did
get
not pay,
spent.
yes.
This money did not get spent. Thank you.
Moving on to the next slide, this was staff's identification of sources for settlement. So we spoke a little bit, and I'll recap. The reduction of ending fund balance from 8% to 6%, $2.2 million. The net C-tax over budget, which I'll let Darren speak to that in much more detail. My layman's approach to this is it's performing pretty well, and we believe $2.1 million will be available for us to put for the settlement, and I'm sure that Darren can give a much more forensic, detailed answer if you so choose. The vacancy savings, that's talking about the attrition that we spoke about in the earlier slide, and then again, Darren can weigh in on this, but the municipal court, the funds that they receive through their fees are supposed to stay within their coffers for 2 years. After that, they escheat to the general fund for the city, and that's where $400,000 we believe was identified for settlement. The more cops, that was $2.1 million. You'll see in asterisk and then in red, that again goes back to that particular fund remaining in balance. So without it remaining in balance, it's not accessible. So that's why you see two different numbers there. If the more cops, if through the concessions there are restrictions that allows that particular fund to stay in balance, there's another $2.1 million that can be applied towards the settlement. Without that, $5.6 million is the total available amount.
When you say imbalanced, you mean, because there's already a fund balance there, right? And assume that there are other monies that are coming in?
That's correct.
So you could pull out whatever the increment was this year?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
You could pull out whatever the increment that was coming into that so that the fund could stay balanced?
Yes, I'm going to have Darren answer that.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, the challenge with the More Cops Fund is that it's projected over the next couple years. I mean, there are actually more cops in there than the fund can support presently from the revenue stream that's coming in from the More Cops tax. So as it stands right now in the operations and forecasted increases that might be in that area, that fund balance that it has in there will be burned off in about 2.5 years. So if those funds are to be included in a settlement, that fund would need to start to live within its revenues. That was one of the recommendations that was repeated throughout by our auditor that reviewed this model, was they identified a number of funds that were not living inside their revenue source and recommended that be brought into balance. In this case, if the More Cops Fund could be brought into balance through concessions on the parts of those cops that are taking compensation out of it, then rationally some portion of that fund balance could be used. Now, fund balance isn't the same as cash balance. There's a reconciliation between those two that exists, but this is the amount that we identified that we believe, if that fund were brought into balance, could be used for possible settlement. But that's really that would be a voluntary agreement on the part of the More Cops in order to accomplish that. If I might also...
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, it's Betsy. I think you need to open the next item as well procedurally, because you're talking about the lawsuit settlement, which is the next item. You can take them together, but I think for the record, it'd be cleaner for the minutes.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Item 8 is presentation regarding North Las Vegas City's efforts to settle the labor lawsuit. So now we have both agenda items open. So that we're all square now? All right, good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I had a question. Renee Cantu for the record. As I look at this presentation, which is new to me, my understanding obviously is 25,000 plus 18, so it's a $43 million deficit. And in looking at this, is it my understanding that that staff has identified $7.7 million towards the resolution of the settlement only, leaving, what is that, 43 minus 7, $35 million that has yet been unresolved? Am I correct in this analysis?
Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Cantu, $7.7 million, yes, has been identified to settle the $22.7 million lawsuit.
Okay, and that's not touching the $18 million deficit, which is on top of?
Yes, those are two separate matters. And I just have to be clear, I'm the city attorney for the city of North Las Vegas. There is no judgment yet, and I know that's kind of been discussed very freely. There is an order, and we're trying to work with the parties to get to a stipulated judgment. We have calculated a back pay and holiday pay exposure of a potentially $21 million. And just for the record, I know that City Manager Fretwell mentioned about having the second item open. This presentation that was given at the special city council meeting was not to talk about settlement. It was just to identify sources available for settlement. Last night at the North Las Vegas City Council meeting, our city council actually voted to direct staff to attempt to settle the litigation with the $7.7 million, with the 2.1 contingent upon the More Cops Fund staying in the black, which basically is making staff say we have to get concessions going forward to make sure that fund stays in the black. So that's the procedural history that's kind of happened. This is the same slideshow that was given back in February, but last night we had official direction from council to go ahead and settle with these dollar figures.
Mr. Chair.
So, Dr. Cantu, with respect to your question, I just had to get all that out. There is $7.7 million available to settle that potential judgment that may be around $21, $22 million, but we still have a structural deficit of $18 million going forward.
Okay, and I guess part of my, concern or a bit of frustration is we're talking about this very large sum of money that puts the city at great risk, and yet many of the solutions that we're talking about, and mind you, we're just an advisory council, touch a very little bit of that overall problem, and it feels to me that we are talking about, revenue enhancements, but we're not talking, I haven't heard any conversation about fundamental changes that would have to be made both in enhancements as well as possibly reduction or restructuring that would help to get to that huge deficit that is on the table. So that's my question. How does the city plan to get, what are some of the thoughts to get there? Not to the, if you're looking at 43 million and we're talking 7.7, how do you fill that giant gap?
Mr. Chair, through you to Dr. Cantu, we've had a pretty comprehensive program that we've been working on at least for the last couple of months. In regards to, we have gone through several layoffs, not in the neighborhood of a number that will fulfill this particular gap, mind you, but we have made some pretty significant structural changes in the organization. We've gone through a functional consolidation, many reclassifications, and again, layoffs at the director level and assistant director level that are contributing to savings. But as you speak to that overall contribution to such a large deficit, I understand what you're saying, that will not fill that hole in and of itself. We are hopeful as we kind of branch into the other portion, number 8, I believe, on the agenda. We are hopeful that the bargaining groups are going to pay a large contribution to our solution. It'll be a large part to that solution. And that weaves me into the settlement discussions that we have that are up for discussion today. We've met with each of the bargaining groups twice. We're meeting with each of the bargaining groups once a week. At the special city council meeting, put on the record that we are going to attempt to solve by April 15th. Really, it's at the end of March, because our first city council meeting, I believe, is April 3rd or April 4th, to have a solution in place that would have to include the bargaining groups. That would include, we have 2 bargaining groups that their contracts expire June 30th, the Teamsters and the POA, and we have the other 2 bargaining groups that are in contract for 1 more year, ending in 2015, to try to receive concessions from them. So without that large contribution, which would be a significant part to this deficit, then we won't be able to close that gap. But so far, so good. Everything is there. I believe, and we believe, that they've been willing partners, at least so far. We don't have any deals on the table, so to speak, but every meeting has been very, very positive in belief that there's a willingness to save the city and avoid further catastrophe.
Maybe it's just easier for me, but it seems to me we have two issues here. One is the potential judgment, to your point, which you've identified some resources that could satisfy that any potential judgment. But separately, you have an $18 million shortfall. We talked about where perhaps 1.7 million of it could be reduced today, but you're going to bring forward other things that ultimately will get that number down. And presumably it has to get to zero by 2015, right?
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I'd like to bring to your attention that we've been looking into was, obviously, if it's not reducing expenditures, it might be increasing revenues, and that business licenses was one of those. We had been working to identify what the impact might be and present the information in the future to the City Council to identify what the impact of taxes might be, property taxes to the citizens of North Las Vegas. The process, the budget timeline that the City Manager Buchanan went over identified that there's a timeline that we communicate to the state about if there are any changes that we might, as staff, consider evaluating in the budget, and then they respond back to us along with other revenue sources that we would be able to take into consideration. And then later on, they come back and then they kind of validate what those tax rolls might look like or what that tax revenue might look like. For us, taking an estimate on that would be a while to wait. So we were working with Terry Rubalt in her office. She had done a presentation at the time earlier in one of your meetings talking about the impact of what was that? Well, it wasn't raising taxes. At the time, she was talking about the impact of what might happen if we go into severe financial emergency. But at that time, she had talked about the potential for raising taxes, and Mr. Tom Riley had contacted her about a calculation to see what the impact might be of those taxes and understand that better. She had given us some information that was helpful, but that was on a high-level spreadsheet calculation that we were then basing some of our potential solutions and options on. That was a neighborhood of $6 or $7 million that we thought might be available to us to help resolve the deficit that we're talking about. In working closely through these shared services with the City of Las Vegas and Mr. Vincent and his staff, they were able to spend the weekend actually going to the assessor's office, getting detailed records of all of our parcels, and building a complicated model to assess exactly what that is. And if I can, I'd like to turn just a minute over to Mr. Vincent to tell you about what we found out in that process and the role it would play in this potential for revenue. Mr. Vincent.
Mr. Chairman, yes. In looking at the initial analysis that taxation had done for North Las Vegas, it was obvious that what they had done is assumed that the abatement rate at the current operating tax rate would stay the same regardless of how high you increased your property tax rate. And I think North Las Vegas can raise their rate up by, I think, 30.56 cents, something like that, so a substantial tax increase. And so I told Darren that that was the only assumption they had because taxation doesn't have the data on which to calculate the impacts of the abatement, the cap abatement, actually for fiscal year 2015, the cap is projected to be at 3% both for residential and commercial in Clark County, so it's a 3% cap. So I indicated to Darren, Mr. Adair, that we had staff that if he was okay, we would ask for the parcel by parcel data from the county treasurer here, and we would do some calculations and modeling for him, which we did accomplish. And the result of that is that the assessed value on the parcel set that we were looking at grew by almost 19% for the city of North Las Vegas, which is good news. The bad news is most of those parcels are now capped out. And so, for an example, a 1 cent tax rate increase, which I I think North Las Vegas is 19 and change. To go to 20 and change would generate $65,000 in extra tax revenue. The abatement rate is already at 80%. If you increase the North Las Vegas rate to the full max, driving the overlapping rate to 366, it would generate an extra $1 million roughly in tax revenue, and about 92% of the parcels would be capped out. So that's the dynamics of the property bill tax caps. That's why we have a working group of finance folks throughout the state. Ms. Verlardo, I think, is aware of that as well, that we're trying to look at what's going on with the tax structure, how is the tax caps, how are they working, and to try to decide, are there some possible solutions that might make it more responsive during this recovery period. So that's the gist of what I can tell you.
We had a discussion at one point about the severe financial emergency, and there was a bunch of conditions that had to be met. What's the status of all that?
Yeah, the status, Ms. Rubalt on that call confirmed that they've been watching it very closely, and she confirmed our understanding, and that is that presently we are not in default of any of the 27 requirements. We still believe that to be the case.
Okay. Is it, Jay Barrett, on the SFE, the severe financial emergency, do I recall correctly that you could ask for that? Could ask to be treated under severe financial emergency?
Yes, the governing body, the local government, does have the ability to pass a resolution asking the Department of Taxation to come in and take over the day-to-day management of the city.
So the city's facing a small s, severe financial challenge here. What would happen in regards to the unions if the city was in severe financial emergency in that state?
Well, based on the current statutory scheme, it really doesn't address what would happen with collective bargaining unions. However, at the last couple city special shared services meeting, Ms. Rubalt, who is the Department of Taxation, she would be the expert on this matter, stated that they would not touch or affect any collective bargaining agreements. I believe she also stated, and if she's on the call, she can correct me if I'm wrong, that if a collective bargaining matter is actually pending in arbitration, they would not touch the arbitrator's decision. There are some sections in NRS 354 that address the severe financial emergency that discuss if a local government is in threatened or pending or current litigation, and the result of that litigation would result in a severe financial emergency. That's another mechanism outside of the 27 factors that Mr. Christensen just mentioned. That could be a trigger for a local government to ask for the department to come in as well.
So you...
But unfortunately, I can't answer specifically that question as to what would happen with the unions. I don't think it's not addressed in the statutory scheme at all.
I don't know that this is addressed either in the statutory scheme, and again, maybe Terry, if she's on the phone, would know. But I am pretty familiar with severe financial emergency, and if the department were to go full up on the tax rate, which they're allowed, which is way more than the 30 cents, they could go to $4.50. If I remember right, Ms. Rubal presented us the letter that from the AG's office that it would be outside. My concern would be, without having the judgment, this is personal opinion, that I don't know how you go to your taxpayers under severe financial emergency with a $4.50 rate that might not improve the services or get them out of this debt. If there's not some indication that if you had this takeover, if you will, under severe financial emergency, that you could in fact not put it to employee salaries and compensation, that might be one thing that could be bought off, or an amount up to $4 or whatever it is, or maybe the 30 cents done under those statutory provisions, which would take it outside the abatement and give you a bit more money. But, you know, I represent taxpayers, and I will tell you that would be an anathema to me not to be able to solve your problem if I'm going to have to choke on that type of a property tax increase. And I've seen severe financial emergency work. I am a proponent of it when necessary. But in this particular case, that unknown scares me personally. I don't know about anybody else on the committee, but if I lived in North Las Vegas, I'd want to know that I could improve my human services department. I want to be able to fix potholes, to continue with some of my infrastructure needs, not have it be used for a settlement. And I'm sorry if I sounded like I was on a soapbox, but I have a problem onto those conditions unless we could find out absolutely that if you were taken under severe financial emergency and any amount was raised in property tax, it would go solely to solving the city's problem, not collective bargaining agreements or to be used for collective bargaining.
Ryan Juden for the record. I didn't want to remove you from your soapbox because you were going pretty well. But I did want to make one distinction in as far as the discussion of what SFE would do if we were to, the local governing body was to move into SFE because of the threatened litigation, is it does specifically say that the litigation itself would be stayed, at which time the State Department of Taxation would have a 60-day window with which they would liquidate, is what the language of the statute says. And I also concur with the assessment that it is a very difficult proposition to make to ratepayers, and I believe that as the State Department of Taxation is within the governor's office, and I don't speak for the governor, but I do believe that it doesn't seem likely that there's much of an appetite to increase taxes at all for the sole purpose of paying back raises from the past, nor paying raises in the future. And that's a very good point, and it's something that we've actually been working with the unions on, and we believe that our collective bargaining groups understand that SFE is, while yes, you could say it's an option, but it's an option that becomes particularly more difficult for them and for their condition.
So what happens to any potential claims then? How does that work? You go into SFE, let's say, just for argument's sake, that there was a judgment against you of some significant amount. You end up not being able to close the structural deficit. You've got this, you decide to go to SFE. What's the process then?
Well, I can only refer to the statute, and it's NRS 354-701, and it discusses when the Department of Taxation actually takes over the local government. Like Ryan just mentioned, the action is stayed, and so there's no attachment or garnishment or execution until there's two conditions that have to be satisfied. The department then meets with the creditors, and I think if there's a judgment, then, you know, the person that we owe the money to would be a creditor, meets with the department to formulate a program for the liquidation of debt owed by the city to the creditor, and then the department has to adopt a program for the liquidation of the debt owed from the local government to the creditor. And per statute, it states the department has to formulate that plan no later than 60 days after meeting with the creditor.
So, but it's all creditors, it's bondholders.
Well, these would be
unsecured creditors.
When I read the statute, and this is just based on my review, you have the process of severe financial emergency when the department says they can come in because you've met those 27 enumerated factors. Then you also have a section, it's 686 through 705, that discusses the litigation aspect, right? When you have a potential judgment that puts you into a severe financial emergency. And that's when they talk about meeting with the creditors and formulating a plan within 60 days. So there's two different kind of triggers, if you will, based on my review of 354 as to when you can declare a severe financial emergency. One is when the department sees that there's these factors and they can come in, and then when there's threatened litigation, the city then can ask for them to come in because the litigation itself creates that emergency.
But then the state essentially steps into the city's shoes in negotiating with the various creditors?
That is correct. All of the powers that the state has at that point is actually in Section 695, and they can step in and they take over the management of the city.
Okay, but the state then could raise revenues, tax revenues,
Yes.
significantly more than what the city can at this point.
Yes, that is my understanding.
Ryan Juden for the record. That's actually a great question. It's something that the council contemplated significantly whenever they made the determination to offer the $7.7 million to the collective bargaining groups. And the determination that they made at the time, and I believe that it's an example of why this committee is here today and all the effort that Las Vegas and North Las Vegas have been working on in the Shared Services Committee, is we believe that the impact of severe financial emergency or state receivership of North Las Vegas would be the cost, the price tag associated with that would be much higher than $7.7 million. So we believe that because of this impact that we would receive on the region and possibly the entire state, as this committee heard testimony from the financial experts that came in from Barrick and the bondholders, we believe that it's a very difficult number to quantify, but we do believe that it would be much greater than $7.7 million, and that's why council took the bold step in offering $7.7 million to avoid a potential hit that the entire region would take that could be tens of millions of dollars.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question?
Yes.
Sir, you know, as we look at this problem, you know, confronting the city, as I listen to the presentations, I hear about revenue enhancements, or I guess increases in fees for businesses and possibly increases in taxes for taxpayers. What I'm not hearing as much about is finding ways to reduce costs. And that's what I'm very keenly interested in hearing more about, because it seems that the magic bullet is to raise money. What I see is that many of the deals maybe with the unions were made in boom times when it seemed like, you know, the boom would never end. And now we're sitting here with a deal that the city cannot afford. So my question is the city looking statutorily at making changes, or does NRS bar that in terms of being able to come up with better or shorter term deals with its bargaining units so that it doesn't land in this position in the future?
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that was one of the purpose today for the business license, but then next week we're going to hear recommendations for economic development and redevelopment departments. And as we have looked at some of these other departments, we've had some discussion about it, but there hasn't been any kind of specific proposals. Okay. But you guys tell me, my understanding of this is that the amount of expenses that they'd be able to cut can only go so far.
Okay.
But,
Mr. Chair, may I, to Dr. Cantu, sometimes it's easier to look, as the chair had stated, at expenses that you can cut, because you don't have quite as much control over the collective bargaining unions. That's really a matter of whether they will be able to look themselves in the mirror and say, it's either we take some concessions or we don't have a city, we don't have a job. And it depends on whether they want to go the route of Eastern Airlines and put the company out of business, or whether they want to be realistic enough to say, I can live out of a little bit less as long as I have income. But you don't have as much control over the bargaining unions.
that's a good point, though. What happens to all those agreements? Now the state, say that you put the SFE through and the state's now running it. What happens to all the employees, whether they're with bargaining units or not? How does that work? There's still things that need to happen in North Las Vegas.
I don't know if taxation's still on the phone, but they may be able to answer that question.
This is Terry Wallman, Department of Taxation. Perhaps I can respond in a little bit to that question. The purpose of, or the mission of the Department of Taxation is to find ways to balance the budget while at the same time finding that level of service that provides the minimum amount of services required to be given to the city
Well, do they have to recognize the collective bargaining agreements?
We have to recognize existing collective bargaining agreements, that we will certainly be at the table for new, to negotiate and approve new contracts. And in fact, that is one of the powers in NRS 64.695 is to negotiate and approve all contracts on behalf of the local government before execution. We do have Attorney General advice that in the case of collective bargaining agreements that are in existence, that we couldn't break those, but we could certainly negotiate new ones for the future.
Okay.
And the statute actually says that the collective bargaining agreements that would be entered into would have to be our final except as to issues submitted to the fact finder, and we'd have to rely on the provisions of the Employees Management Relations Act. Is there another question I could answer for you?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Ryan Juden for the record. Just want to point out just a couple things for the committee. One is that the $7.7 million that the council has offered to settle the last 2 years is also designed to help settle the next 2 years. So it's a tool that the council is currently using to as an attempt to work with the collective bargaining groups to balance the budget moving forward. And, you know, while yes, the severe financial emergency does in fact allow the State Department of Taxation to increase the rates, as we've already discussed, the impact that would have. It also places, first of all, the two of the largest contracts that are currently with two of our largest collective bargaining groups are up this summer. So touching those contracts really isn't an issue because those contracts are coming up and they're up for renegotiation. It is very important to point out that one of the consequences of increasing your ability to pay when you increase taxes, as the state is able to do, is that it increases your ability to settle with creditors. It increases your ability to offer richer contracts. So this is there are widespread implications to going into SFE, which I think everybody is fairly confident about one thing, which is we don't really know a lot of what it is and a lot of what it does. And while I agree with members of the committee that have talked about that this has worked, when it worked in Gabbs with 522 people, we have 3 times more employees than that. When it worked in White Pine County of 10,027 people, it was dramatically different because they didn't have CFOs, they didn't have professionals like we had. They were not looking at the problem that they had and understanding we understand the severity of the problem. We believe our bargaining groups do too, which is why we're working very, very diligently with them right now to avoid this, which is something that would be a catastrophe because not only does it injure our ratepayers now, but it also takes some of the largest swaths of industrial dirt in the entire southern region of Nevada. It really starts to take those out of play because now the taxes on that land and the taxes to do business down here in the south becomes dramatically almost difficult to do business. And it makes it very difficult for North Las Vegas or for our southern Nevada region moving forward to be able to right the ship and correct things, which is why such an untested process is something that really, I sense the committee feels, you know, what is this? What does this mean? And they're good questions because we just don't know.
Yes.
This is Terry Ruble again. If I could just add one thing, just a general comment. Severe financial emergency should be everyone's last choice.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, Darren Adair for the record. I wanted to also point out that we have an opportunity tomorrow that we're looking forward to, and that is to meet with the Committee on Local Government and Finance. We recognize that group as being a very experienced collection of municipal finance and accounting experts. So we have an opportunity, first of all, to appear before them and answer questions over much of the same material that you, as a shared service committee, have had the opportunity to review and consider, and to address some of their questions. But also, we hope to approach that body and seek answers and guidance. Some of the things that have been listed here in front of you, such as reducing the fund balance from 8% to 6%, it was that body that advised the City Council previously that 8% would be a good minimum threshold that they ought to adopt by resolution under the circumstances. So again, we want to go back in front of them and talk to them about that, and among other things, to get their feedback and their recommendations. I think, as Ms. Rubalt pointed out, obviously we'd like to have a plan, and we've been working on plans and options, but we also think that by sharing information with a larger group, that we can also involve them in the solutions and opportunities, and we're looking forward for that opportunity tomorrow and think that'll be a very positive meeting, and hope to report back to you as well on the progress of that meeting.
Any other comments? Questions? Anyone on the phone have questions? Is there anything else that you'd like to present to us? Okay. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, so before we have citizens come, I just want to kind of recap of where we kind of came today. The first thing is that on the business license, you received the recommendations, and I just want to point out that where that wasn't a specific shared service arrangement that we perhaps talked about at the beginning, as you saw, it was a realization of a considerable amount of new revenue coming into the city, and that was a direct result of the agreement that the City of Las Vegas came in, the tremendous amount of time they spent with the staff of North Las Vegas to come up and share ideas and best practices. What you'll see at the meeting on the 20th is a shared service arrangement for redevelopment and economic development, the stuff that we've been working on, the workshop, the feedback that we received from the members of the workshop. So I think what you'll see there is a more traditional shared service arrangement between the two entities. So today, the information that North Las Vegas shared with this committee about the proposed settlement of the $7.7 million, and to utilize that as a tool to work with their collective bargaining agreements for the upcoming years. Mr. Chairman, I think this gets to some of the questions that you and many other committee members have been asking about. I think that we're slowly getting to the place where we can kind of show that 18 million deficit and then start taking and chipping off where that deficit looks like. For example, the new revenue for business license, the efficiencies and the layoffs and the services that North Las Vegas is being engaged in, how much specifically they think through the collective bargaining agreements can attribute to that. So perhaps at the last meeting we have maybe a more clear picture too about where that 18 million and what progress has been made towards that. Of course, the redevelopment and the economic development is more of a long-term issue that's very important to look at some of the potential revenues that can result from that.
Thank you. All right, I guess we're ready for agenda item 9, citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the committee. No subject may be acted upon by the committee unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject, as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Does anyone wish to be heard under this portion of the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brian McAnallen, representing the Las Vegas Metro Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to recognize the efforts of the City of Las Vegas and their business licensing section, and certainly the City of North Las Vegas and its business licensing department, to work on some of these coordinated changes. I think the presentation made by Mr. Blackburn today and where the City of North Las Vegas is heading with regard to proposed ordinances and timelines to come into some compliance and moving forward with regard to improving their operations and efficiencies with regard to business licensing is the right direction, and we appreciate these efforts. It has been long a concern of the Las Vegas Metro Chamber that we work together as a region down here to make licensing as easy as possible across one jurisdiction to the other for businesses both large and small. And I think the efforts that are undertaken today through the Shared Services Committee and the proposals that were discussed here and recommendations that will hopefully be adopted by City Council are movement in the right direction for our businesses, making it easier when we cross these jurisdictional lines, and appreciate all the effort that both municipalities have put together and the strong suggestions that are made here. So thank you very much, and thank you to those licensing departments and their staff.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? I just want to thank the members of the committee for all your hard work. Also want to thank both North Las Vegas and Las Vegas. We've kind of been in the middle of this. We've watched it. We know how much effort this has taken, and it's a steep hill, and we're not done yet. But we would strongly encourage you to keep going, because this is incredibly important to our community. With that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.